All right, thanks for coming, everybody, to DVEM Rising. Just to give you the quick history, I think most of you already know this, but we have annually a group that meets Data Vault and Ensemble modeling enthusiasts, because the E shouldn't be lofty. So are you experts? No, we're enthusiasts. We're excited about working with Data Vault and Ensemble. And people are literally flying in from everywhere. We did our map the other day, and we discovered we were from eight or nine different countries. No, it was 9 different countries, not including the US. That's what it was. Including South Africa and including Australia and New Zealand. Thanks, guys. So a really, really interesting crew. So what's happening is we're talking about what's going on with Data Vault and Ensemble, where things should be heading in the next iteration. We debate, discuss, you could say fight maybe sometimes. I wouldn't call it that necessarily. And then we come up with what we can agree on for some guidance or some standards. We don't do a fantastic job publishing all that, but we're getting better as we go. So hopefully that'll continue to get better. But the idea was this week is, hey, we're here, we're together. A lot of different people we're going to discuss or present something. So why not just have some people come on up, let's present, capture it on video, live studio audience. That's the whole thing. So here we are. So that's really the idea behind it. So we'll kick off now late, but that's okay because, I can condense my stuff down as needed, so this will be fine. And we'll get right back on time again. I don't see it anymore, but there was a timer telling me, when the hook comes to pull me off. But we'll talk a little bit here about collaborating with business to model the enterprise. Those of you that were here, which is pretty much most of you earlier, are familiar now with kind of this new direction. I was talking to Richard Hackathorn earlier today about the same thing, which is pretty passionate about this concept that to make things work, we need to get back to the idea of having a business model. And it's almost like when we had our issues with enterprise data warehousing, and then we blew it off because it was too hard to do. And then after a while, we said, we can't blow it off. We have to have a central warehouse layer. It just needs to be agile, or it's not going to work. And now I guess we could say the same thing. We need to have a business model driven so we can aim at something. And if it's too hard to build, it needs to be agile, and we need to make it work. So I think that's kind of where we see it. That's just kind of one of the themes here for our discussions. So, but anyway, as we go, this agenda will be sitting out there for you guys to see, so you can always find out what's happening next. Our break coming up will be at 10 o'clock, and it's a half-hour networking break. A lot of time, hopefully, for you guys to get together and chat like you were doing this morning. It was really hard to even pull you apart. Some people might have to just stay apart from each other, so we can make it easier to have that happen. And then, but you can see kind of what we're doing. Part of it is also this 5 and dime. Used to be 5 by 5s, right? But we're doing some that are 5 minutes, some 10, max 15. And you're on a strict timeline. So, Jeff, since you're kicking off the 5 and dimes, watch that timer. You're on a strict 5, and then the next person, I forget who's the next one. Oh, you're kicking off the 5. Oh, it's the next one. Oh, the second one, sorry. I was looking at this one. Yeah, the second one. So Remco, you got to stick with those 5 minutes. And then the hook comes when we pull you off. But the idea is, of course, you're not going to get everything. But if the topic that you heard in the 5-minute spiel was really interesting, then, of course, we're going to go networking. So go talk to the person and find out what they're doing, which is the whole idea. Okay, so that's the morning. We got the afternoon, and we'll keep you going. And then we have a reception here starting at 3:45. It's an hour and a half, cocktails and drinks and whatever. So hang out for that, okay? I'm going to start out with a discussion on collaborating with business to model the enterprise. Just to reiterate, we will capture this stuff on video. Part of that is going to be for Data Vault Ensemble enthusiasts, and part of it is, if you guys are interested, share it with the world. So whatever you want to do with it is fine, but it could be interesting to have. Okay, so collaborating with business to model the enterprise. Let's start off with just kind of a fun, quick couple of bullet points, bullet being an operative term here. Why a business-driven model? Well, you can't hit a target if you don't know what it is. Well, that makes sense. Or let's put it another way. If you aim at nothing, you'll hit it every time. That's true too. Nothing improves your aim like having a target. Yep, that probably makes sense, right? And without a goal, you can't score, which, okay, makes sense too. So kind of be awkward in a football field, soccer field, to run around and there is no goal. It's like, yeah, we can kick that ball around and you could do a time lapse of all the people, just floating around, but what's the point of it? It's not going to go anywhere or do anything. It's interesting because Len Silverson has this little quote I always like to say, which is, if you don't understand the data, it can only be less useful or dangerous, which is the full part of the quote, which really makes sense. If we don't know what we're looking for and don't understand what it is, we're not going to really get anywhere. So that's, I think, one of the things we really have to look out for. Why business-driven model? What are we doing with integration today? How are we integrating data? Kind of like this, basically. I'll connect this to that and then connect this other one to the other one, and this happens at different times and we don't know how we did it, and that's crazy. So people say, well, I'm having issues with this, so I need to have some kind of a central layer, but why don't I start with the sources? Well, then you get all the copies of different interpretations in different order and wherever you put it, and then what? Do you have this same exact thing you started with before you got there? Kind of looks like that soccer field would look, doesn't it? It's like, you don't have a goal, where's the ball going to go? Yeah, it's got nowhere to go. So that's really the problem we're facing today. We do this all the time, and I know the people that are in our group, in our consortium, are involved with this all the time. It's so prevalent, so commonplace in the industry that people approach modeling by saying, dump it all in a bucket, like Hadoop environment, and the lake, messy, whatever, will automatically make sense, and you can pull information out of it. Yeah, tell me how that's working for you. And of course, we know the answer is, it ain't working for you, right? The other thing is, well, let's just start with the sources and map them in, and then we'll have some kind of central view. No, you've got co-located data, but as far as some kind of central meaning, you really don't know what it is. And we've had a reprieve, I would say is the word, from having to worry about this, because in relational database management systems, we could say, well, the source has a structure. So I can kind of piggyback off the structure that I can see there already. Until we get to some of the big data deployments, and there is no schema to drive the way the data is stored. Well, it sits outside the record, right? The schema that defines consistency sits outside the record. You can have a definition for a JSON schema, a definition for an arrow schema, but it's not being maintained where the data is stored. So you need to have some kind of a model or schema outside it to describe what it is or to define how it should be captured or how it's worked. We all know that. I mean, Ruslana's here, you're doing that every single day. So how do you get the structure in there? Our Swedish colleagues that are doing it as well, we need to have some kind of a schema and understanding. What's it based on? It's got to be based on some kind of a business-driven definition. So in the end, we have to start with that thing, and that really defines where we sit now for our reference architecture, I would say, which says we do some kind of a business model. We use that business model to create a target that we can aim at, a goal that we can shoot for, right? And then we start scoring, or we start hitting the target because we got something that we're aiming at. And if we have to, guess what? I got to pass the ball over to Dave, and Dave's got to pass it over to Ben, and then Ben's going to take the shot. Maybe we have to do a few maneuvers, some transformational ETL to get to the goal. But ultimately, no matter where it starts from, we'll get it there. Well, assuming we're a good team. Orange, right? Orange. Yeah, okay, whatever. Although the Swedes did really well this year. So, hey, Sverige, we're kicking. So there are some things that may happen here along the way. It doesn't quite, I got to ping, pong, whatever, send it in. But I'm going to aim at that target and get to the same place, and now it makes sense. So I got something to work with. And then from there we consume it. And we consume it with the idea that things don't have to be persisted in any of the consumption layers. And that's just because if they did, we wouldn't be agile. So we got to have an agile way to do it. Now that doesn't mean that we won't persist for performance purposes on Teradata as required. But the point is, if I went in there and just, is this your Teradata box here? And said, what did you do? You'd be like, don't worry about it. We can just fire it back up and get it going again. Because everything's in the warehouse, so it's going to be okay. Then we're still on the agile path, right? Everything should come from here. It's really, really the way we're looking at it. So, okay, we're all caught up. Now what? How do we get there? And so on Monday, we did our kickoff for the Ensemble Logical Modeling Workshop. And the idea is that we enable facilitators in organizations to run logical modeling workshops in a purely agile way, just like we have in our paradigms around ensemble modeling, where you can start with a subject area. You can model a subject area in a quick and easy way, theory of good enough, right? The perfect is the enemy of the good. We don't want it to be the perfect that takes 5 years to get to. We want to get to where we have a usable first step, and it's not going to have to be re-engineered because it's based on business, right? So we're now working towards structure around how we can drive those kind of workshops and make them happen. So for a lot of you, this is recap to discuss it, but we take our Post-it based, I know, this is what's called the big reveal. No? Something like that. The big reveal. We take our Post-it based model and we actually effectively go right from ensembles, as we refer to these, core business concepts, person, event, thing, place, other concept. And when we model it this way with business meaningful terminology, things that come from the business itself, we can actually map this directly from where we started to some kind of ensemble modeling pattern. And for those of you that don't, I mean, this is another exciting thing, which is the ensemble modeling pattern. It's like, of course, Data Vault. Like we're all familiar, most of us here, with that. But also anchor modeling, focal point modeling, 2G, head inversion, 6NF variations, temporal style modeling. These are all methods where the idea has been the same. Unified decomposition. Break things apart. It's more efficient. You can separate concerns, work on a piece at a time. But it still holds together, right? That's kind of where we are. So we can go basically directly to physical. In this case, the examples for a Data Vault model. But it could have just as easily have been at this point an anchor model or a focal or something else. Automation can help us along this, of course, but you're not going to be able to automate the creation of the initial model, right? That has to come from business workshops. All of us, right, in unison. Oh, but it's really hard and then they don't want to talk to us and we can't get them to come in the room. Yep, you know what? We got to figure it out. That's now where we are. We got to figure out how to get them in the room. So our challenge now is get them in the room and then have a good way to capture this information. We can't give up on it. I was using the example the other day of fishing. I pretty much suck at fishing. There's people who are good at it. But you can just go out there and say, I put the lure on and I have the right line and I cast it and damn fish just don't, it doesn't work. I'm just giving up. I've tried it 10 times, it doesn't work at all. Until that's the only food you have. And then you're going to be like, I got to figure out how to make that work, right? So we're just going to have to persist and figure it out. So some of the things we're doing now is, again, focusing on the ELM Workshop. And the ELM Workshop is really, again, to get facilitators to where they can run a session and draw this information out. Interactive, facilitated, business-driven design session, depending on the active participation of the attending business-oriented people, right? I don't remember, Richard, maybe who this was. I think it was related to one of the Teradata events we were at, probably. But there's someone who said, I've never been in an organization, walked down the hall and found the Department of Business. And it's like, yeah, and yet we all just talk about, oh, we need the business, we need the who is this elusive business? And so I would say it's everyone in the organization except for you, or to put it a nicer way, it's everyone in the organization except for IT and the data professionals. That's the business. How's that sound? We'll make it easier. So if it says anything except for IT or data on the door, that's your business people right there. Okay, we'll go and work with them. During the workshop, participants work together on identifying the core business concepts and also the natural business relationships. So we want to know how things naturally relate to each other. Can we discover relationships from the data? Sure. But here's a question for you. How did you do that in 1812? How did you do it in 1722? How did you do it in 1416? Because guess what? There were banks operating during those times. Insurance companies operating during those times. Logistics companies operating during those times. Could they just go, well, hold on, let me query the data and see what the relationships are? Nope. And let's see, what is a computer? It's automating a business process. It isn't the business process itself, right? So it's artifacts of whatever it happened to capture, which we all know from modeling databases, right? What we captured is whatever we felt like designing at the time. So that ain't the business, right? The business is actually, what do you guys do, Reese? Well, how do things work? Okay, this is how we establish those things. So now we get to these models. Running an ELM workshop, guess what? We're going to take time to analyze things. We're going to discuss it, contemplate. But I think that's my favorite picture, by the way. It's just after, you can imagine there's all this stuff going on, and then this one person, like it's break time or whatever, is just going, yeah, what's going on with this, right? It's perfect. And then also present. And I think this is one of the things that I keep threatening to find the reference, because it's been so long ago, I don't recall now where it came from. But the idea was that if you wanted to have a component of a pedagogy or a way to deliver a course that would be guaranteed to improve mastery of learning objectives. So you have a learning objective for the course, people are going to master it, yes or no. Do you have something that I know causally will make that happen, in a causal relationship? And the thing that came up from wherever I read this was have a small group with an expectation of presenting to the rest of the group. So they have to go and put something together and then present it back. And as I recall, it didn't matter if they actually ended up presenting, but they had to believe they were going to present. That's how things got wired in their head. So anyway, the point is, presenting is part of this. You're going to be working together and say, okay, Remco, come on up and walk us through what you got. And then now there's this, okay, the way that we wire things and figure things out when we present is actually an important part of the workshop. So some artifacts. This is a guy we were just working with a few weeks ago in New York City, trying out the new forms here, and yeah, it worked out pretty well for their purposes. But basically, what we're doing is we're getting to the model through a set of structured questions, through some forms and artifacts that we can use. Remember, perfect is the enemy of the good. We don't want to be complex here. We want to make it simple and easy for people to actually be able to use it. But providing some guidance is also important, because in the end we want to grab these artifacts. So that's what we're aiming at. Remco and myself decided we're going to turn the world upside down and not go with 5 W's. Oh, please, that was 20 years ago, and 6 W's when you add a little bit more like when, and then we're not going to do the whole Lawrence core beam 7 W's, where you also have how many or how much, so you can have a metric for a mart. We're like, throw all that away. 8. 8 is better, right? It's a higher number. So, and the new thing is 8 W's. The idea actually, though, is because we're aiming at those top things, right? Person, event, thing, place, other concept. We may want to leverage some of this, I would say, structure in how we might be able to pull that information out. So identifying who, what, where, why, and then of course when and how. We're not really concerned so much here about how many, but that also will come out as part of the context of measures. So that's another thing to look at. So here's a drive-through that Remco put together. An employee in a store is selling products to a customer. Then we get our core business concepts identified of event, person, thing, place, whatever. And then, coming from a vendor, we do a matrix, and the matrix tells us, is this item a person, place, thing, or event? Why do we do that? Well, because now we can analyze it further to say, are there any here that are the same, or are there any here that I'm missing, right? We then create a canvas, and I apologize, this canvas doesn't have more than one event on it, but the ones we did in class had 4 events, the most recent one we did. And basically the canvas is now throw them all on a board. This is where it really helps to be able to see them together and say, hey, is this person we call employee the same as this thing we call customer? And you may have an immediate answer. Yeah, it is. Okay, cool, right? This is not a job you should entrust to a computer. It's not a job you should entrust to an auto-parsing, build and present data, an auto-magical anything. Why? Let's put it this way. If you think about semantic integration, you got to think to yourself, if the word is the same, we'll understand it's the same. If it's not the same, we don't understand, but we might look at some of the criteria to see if they are the same. What's the computer going to do? Or I'm going to pick on data scientists. You just went through the program, Richard, so you probably understand. A data scientist, right, is going to say, oh, I know how to work with all this data, just give me data. But let me talk to you about warehousing and integration. I don't need that, I got you covered. So a data stream comes in and it has, something like patient and appointment and stuff like that. And it says on the patient record, we've got the sex, and we've got the date of birth, and we've got what's their issue. It's with their eyes, it's with their lungs, it's with their knee, or whatever it's with. And then you're, okay, cool. Let's integrate the data. Except for, whoops, one was a hospital, and one was a pet hospital. So the patient's a cat? Meow. Can I integrate that data into a meaningful way? Probably no. So again, it gets down to, don't just entrust as a computer. What's a client? Someone who buys stuff from us. So a client's a client. But is it, I'm actually talking to Ruslan, the client? Or is Epsilon the client? Well, they're both clients, but different levels mean totally different things. So again, you have to really go through this process of understanding. As we go through it, if you're asking that question and you don't know the immediate answer, I'll flip ahead because I like to do this kind of stuff. We might go right to a CBC form, a core business concept form, that helps us get that quick, what is it you're talking about, right? Critical, again, is, if you ever look up the word derail in the dictionary, you might find that, looking at a core business concept, trying to define it, and then kicking off a 5-year MDM project, that would be derailing this effort, right? That would actually be definitional in there. It's going to end up being 1 page, but before we get to that, let's assume we just go on to the next step. In the next step, we say, now, by event, what are the things that are involved? So just take one of the events. So let's say we have 5, 8, 10, it doesn't matter. Take one of them, and then analyze it by event and say, what are the things that relate to it? And now you can also look at, again, are there some things that are the same? Is there anything we're missing? For those of you that do dimensional style modeling, capture requirements from ART, this also ends up being useful for our fact and matrix crossover, right? So you can have that conversation with those people. Perfect. And then from here, now you can see kind of the broader example of one of these sessions with artifacts. One of the important things here to keep in mind is you don't need to do all these because it's all dependent on how that session is running. If everyone's giving you all the great information, everybody already knows what these things are, there's no argument, everything's perfectly clear, you may skip one or two because it's not really that critical for you to have to do it. It's just more getting to the bottom line, which is the model. That's where we're heading for. So some of the roles, facilitator, someone who's going to help do the list and category grid, someone who's going to do the canvas where everything's put out together, then by event. And then we have these forms. They're just one-pagers. And actually, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain or something like that, right? We have some of the forms. You can come and check them out afterwards if you're interested. We can talk about them that we can use for this purpose. Again, are they final? Are they required? No. The main point of having those things produced is just to show it's on one page. If you start writing a 47-page document on what a customer is, we've already lost this discussion, right? It's gone too far. And then we just go and put a couple attributes in, and maybe that's 8, 10, 12, 15 attributes, just to get an idea of what it is. And we also categorize those so we get a feel for what they belong to. Pulling it all together, the only reason we mention this, and this is just kind of a side note, is that organizations may already, it's probably not uncommon, that they have some kind of an understanding of modeling from a different paradigm perspective. So if it's something related to graph style, they may be working more like on an instance example level, right? Then so we're talking about Hans buys a Prius versus a customer buys a car or a product, right? So it's now the instance versus class. Really fun, right? If you're in Facebook and have you guys seen your like network diagram thing with all the nodes and edges, right? And it's just huge, but they're all friends. So there's this complicated, huge thing that looks really cool, and you can see weighting and thickness of colors for the amount of interaction and all the good stuff. How are you connected to other people? What would it look like in a data model, except person, recursive relationship to person? What's the name of the relationship? Is friends with. Yeah, that's not really fun. Okay, so there may be other paradigms for how we model, but this also kind of covers up the idea of the event concept, so we need to be aware of that. And then if you do concept mapping style, you may or may not be covering up the event, but there are some definite mappings across. So just keep in mind that how does this exact team that you're doing the workshop with communicate about things? And then how can we go with them from there to where we want to get to? And again, if it's business people, not the people with IT on the door, then hopefully they're speaking in business terms. That's definitely our hope. Okay, I guess we just have our slide. This is just a recap where we are with Genesee right now. It's lots of data vaults everywhere, and a lot of now more things happening with ensemble modeling, which I hope to be a much broader course and theory that gets out there, and hopefully driven within organizations themselves versus having a lot of people coming from the outside to show them how to do it. And that's pretty much about it for the first session. I've got 42 seconds left. By the way, that's how it's done, right? But because I didn't have a 5-minute deal, so I could get away with it. Quick question or comment? Yes.
Yes, Hansa, where do you want to take this? I I really like the flow. It's very clear and so forth. So this is a kind of a new methodology for data structuring.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to do a book. In other words, what's the next steps?
Yeah, no, absolutely. They're definitely, for right now, course book and information that people can get access to. We've talked a lot about the role of a facilitator, which is a little bit different than standard trading. So how does a workshop actually run is one thing. What are we doing in a workshop to get people familiar with the methods? That's for everyone involved. But then the facilitator would have to get some more information. Honestly, it's a lot more training and getting IP out than some of these other things like specific to databases. That the main idea would be that as soon as possible, organizations take it over. It's kind of like the train the trainer, but it's really get the facilitator up to where they can run it themselves. I think if you're depending on people to come in and run it for you, in the long term, that's not going to get you there. You need to have that inside the organization to make it work. So hopefully that's where it goes. Yeah, so definitely course book materials, community, get it out as much as we can. I think towards next year, definitely a book as well to get more of the information out. But it has to be, I think, firmed up quite a bit. We had some phenomenal feedback Monday. It was really good to get everybody's involvement. Overall, I can say hopefully the same, very positive, but we definitely have some things we need to fine tune to make it, more repeatable. So, yep. All right, excellent, thanks.